All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this. I will be going over the CAPE TUPS Pro Enterprise Employment and Earnings Survey. So I'll be focusing more so on the CAPE requirements, and we will discuss how to implement this Employment and Earnings Survey. Later in the month, we do have a panel discussion on tactics, talking about intake, how you can improve these survey responses. But for today, we're going to focus on what is the procedures, instructions, guidelines, however you want to call it, regarding this employment and earnings survey. So if you, again, as mentioned, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand, come off mute, or write it in the chat, and we'll get those answered. So for those of you who are new, I want to give a quick introduction on the Employment and Earnings Survey. So this Employment and Earnings Survey is in TOPS Pro Enterprise, and it's focused on those funded K through 12 county offices, the JPAs that are required to do this in TOPS Pro Enterprise. Now, students who have exited your program and that do not have a Social Security number, all those students will be required to be sent this employment and earnings survey through TE. Now, how a student is determined as exited is important to this process, and exiters follow the national reporting system's periods of participation. Now, a period of participation, in summary, without having to go diving super deep into it, a period of participation, or for short, a POP, is a student's uninterrupted period of attendance. That means a student starts in September, continues out through December, leaves for 90 calendar days. After those 90 calendar days, the student is going to be marked as exited in TOPS Pro Enterprise. Now, TOPS Pro Enterprise does all this calculation for you, but it's based off of attendance. So if you're not entering attendance regularly, then TOPS Pro Enterprise can't calculate when a student exits correctly. So that's my last bullet here. Enter in your attendance regularly to avoid these students exiting unintentionally. Now, the second question that I get after I explain what a period of participation is and all these exiters, especially from those who are new to this, is, well, what if my student returns after 90 days? They're not an exiter. What happens? Or what if I have a summer break that is more than 90 days? Well, unfortunately, again, exiters are determined based off these periods of participation. So if you're looking to not survey students who are going to come back into the program, maybe make their breaks less than 90 days, or maybe reach out to them before those 90 days hit so that they aren't considered an exiter. Now, in our NRS data integrity report, we do have two items, and that's 15A and 15B, that'll help you track these students, like right before they're about to be considered an exiter, and then right after they became an exiter. So you can always run your data integrity report and find those students right before. Okay, so there's data matching that happens in two ways. So for the employment and earnings survey, we're focusing on those students that don't have a Social Security number. And if you're entering data into TOPS Pro Enterprise, the more students that have a Social Security number, the less students that have to take this survey. So that's our number one. You'll get your data match through Social Security number, and then those that don't have a Social Security number will need to be sent the survey. Now, this employment and earnings survey was originally created for the National Reporting Systems Table 5, and now that CAPE has aligned, that's why we're doing these surveys. So who doesn't need a survey? Again, those students that don't have a social, or that have a Social Security number won't need to be sent a survey. Now, that's we know that's not possible for everybody at your agency, or maybe there's some district rules or policies that are preventing you from collecting Social Security numbers, and that's okay. But that's why those students will have to be sent the survey. There are some exempt reasons, that's death, military, long-term hospitalization, and incarceration that you can mark in TE, and then those students will be set aside and won't be included in the survey. So that's just a little bit of background about how the survey, about the survey and exiters. And so now we'll go into what the process is. And for those of you who are new, an important thing to know is that this is a quarterly process. So if you refer to the CAPE beginning of the year letter, you'll see that there's an employment and earnings survey deliverable due date every quarter. And that's because this process needs to be done every quarter. We always recommend that agencies start early in the quarter so that there's enough time to get student feedback, and then they can move on to the next quarter after the data submission deadline. So for those CAPE only agencies and those CAPE only students who don't provide a social security number, these students will need to be surveyed 2 quarters after they exit. If you're also a WIOA Title II agency too, then students who exit 2 quarters and 4 quarters back will need to be surveyed too. Here's a little diagram at the bottom that I've laid out. So we have a quarter to take survey. We have the exit quarters that the students exit. And then in the gray, I've kind of graded out, since we're focusing here just on CAPE, those 4 quarters after exit students. And then we have our quarterly data submission due date. So there's a lot of quarters to manage here. So let me give you some definitions on what the difference is between quarter to take survey and exit quarter. Quarter to take survey is the quarter that exiters need to answer the survey responses. Now, exit quarter is when the student actually exited your program. Keep in mind these 2 things, especially when you're in TOPS Pro Enterprise, that there is a difference between each. The quarter to take survey is always going to be 4 quarters after your student has exited. And again, your exit quarter focuses on those 90 days of no attendance. And then again, TOPS Pro Enterprise will determine when the exit quarter happens. For a little bit of ease on when things need to happen throughout the program year, and then what we're talking about when we look at quarter to take survey and exit quarter, and then the data submission due date. I've laid it all out here on this calendar, employment earnings survey calendar here. So we have our quarter to take survey, and in red, I've highlighted the quarter that we're on. So quarter to take survey for right now, that's going to equal 22-23 Q3. For our exit quarter, that's 2 quarters back. That'll be 22-23 Q1. So that's 2 quarters back, or 180 days back from our quarter to take survey. And our quarterly data submission due date will be April 30th, 2023. I know a lot of people like to have this on hand or take a picture, and just so that it lays out when things are due, and when you're looking at TOPS Pro Enterprise, what quarter should I be focusing on? This will lay it all out here for you. So here's another graphic again. Our quarter to take survey for this current quarter is 22-23 Q3, and it'll look like that in TOPS Pro Enterprise. It'll look exactly like, let me see, it'll look exactly like this 22-23 Q3, and then exit quarter, so your column will have the 22-23 Q1. And a little graphic again, here we are here, and then 2 quarters back, we were in the Q1. So just emphasizing those quarters to take surveys versus exit quarter. So we've broken this down into 5 tasks in order to complete the requirement. The first one is always going to be prepare your data. The second one is going to be saving your exit population. The third one is to send the students the survey invite for that exit quarter. Now for CAPE only requirements, and we're focusing on CAPE here, you just need to do those first 3, but it's highly recommended, or especially if you're interested in, or if you're going to be starting that WIOA Title II funding soon, then it's recommended that you're following up with these students on their invitations, and then contacting those students who haven't responded so that we can get higher response rates. And for these next couple slides, I'll go over each step individually. So step one, focusing on preparing your data. The first thing that you want to do before when you're starting this process and you're starting it earlier in the month or earlier in the quarter is finish entering and cleaning all your attendance hours. If you're entering them directly into E, you'll review your attendance hours. If you're transporting them from a third-party import and importing them in, then you're reviewing your attendance hours then, because again, attendance hours is what determines if the student exits or not, and if the student needs a employment and earning survey. The next thing that you'll do is you'll check for students who are marked as retained in program. Now, I want to be very clear, we do not recommend marking retained in program in TOPS Pro Enterprise. Back about a couple years ago, there was this focus on retained in program, but now that we've moved towards POPs or periods of participation, TOPS Pro Enterprise determines if they're retained in program through POPs and through attendance. So again, we do not recommend marking retained in program, but sometimes when you're transferring over, especially from a third party, you'll just want to make sure that these students aren't unintentionally being marked as retained in program. So to do that, you'll go to records, programs, and then enrollments in TOPS Pro Enterprise. And then you'll filter the program status for retained in program. You'll want to remove this program mark in TOPS Pro Enterprise from those students. And again, if they are marked as retained in program by accident and you think you're going to get away with something, at the end of the program year, all these students end up exiting, and it creates this really inflated long list for you 6 months from then. So that's why we don't recommend using it. Again, remove it from these students. And then this last thing is to run the core performance report as a pre-check. And to do that, you'll be looking to see if you've missed any social security numbers for any students, or maybe there's some students showing up on that list that really shouldn't be, or maybe you know that John Doe exited a different day, but it's saying that John exited 2 months before they should. So those are the things that you can check out using the core performance report before you get started on this process. So running that core performance report as a pre-check. In TOPS Pro Enterprise, you'll go to reports, state reports, California, and then core performance population. If we have time towards the end of the session, I'll be able to do this for you in TE real time. And then the next thing you'll want to do is select this exit quarter. And it's important that you're selecting the exit quarter and not the quarter to take survey. Once you generate the report, this is the core performance population report that'll come up, and there'll be 2 distinct tables. So the first one that will generate is any students that fall under this NRS only students. Those are your ABE students, AESE, ESL. Now, if you also have a lot of CAPE agencies have their CTE programs. All those students who are only in those CTE programs will fall under this CAPE only student box. These students won't be duplicated in each. So let's say I have a student that's in a CTE program, but also in ESL. They're not going to be in both boxes or both tables. They're only going to show up once, and they're probably only going to show up under that NRS students. So you don't have to worry about duplication. For some of you larger agencies, this report's going to be a lot longer, but for some of you smaller agencies, your CAPE only agencies, this should be a fairly small table to manage. And if you're able to collect social security numbers, it'll show up on this report too. Now, I've talked a lot about timeline, and here is our suggested timeline for this third quarter requirement. We do suggest starting earlier in the year, but since we're in March, that's why I've adjusted the dates. So if you're like, okay, I need to do this right after the session, this is our suggested timeline and steps and description. And on the right here, this is a screenshot of the guidelines that we provide CAPE agencies and WIOA agencies to complete this requirement. CASAS will lay out these steps for you, step by step, button by button. So if you fumble a little bit in the process, or you don't know where to start, or something interesting comes up, then you can always refer to these guidelines to help guide you. but we recommend that you're saving your exit population and that you're sending the survey to the students and following up with some of those students within this next month. And then in April, you'll want to be just focus only on receiving responses. So that's our little suggested timeline. So before, I'm going to just backtrack a little bit just to be clear. So the first thing you're going to do again is run the core performance report as a pre-check. And then starting now, March, you'll do these next following steps. And if you need, you'll use the employment and earnings surveys guidelines that we have posted on the CASAS website. Now I have a question in the chat. Now, if a student is in ESL and CTE, but hours only get reported from ESL into TE, not CTE, will the student show up on the survey? So yes, the student will show up on the survey because ESL is covered. It'll just show up under the NRS only student column, given that they've exited. Do you highly recommend because it will be required soon? I can't answer that question, but that's why we're just highly recommended it. I would maybe talk to, I don't know if Jay Wright is in here that could talk more about that, but we're just highly recommending for now. Okay, so now we're going to get into what, after you've entered in your hours, that you've ran your pre-checked, everything looks good after that. Now we're getting into the actual steps here, or the second step. So step 2 is saving your exit population. So to do that, you'll go to Tools and Core Performance Wizard in TOPS Pro Enterprise. And we're going to save, again, the exit quarter that equals 22, 23 Q1. So here's a screenshot, Tools, Core Performance Wizard. That's what it looks like. And then there's going to be a series of pop-up windows. They're going to be fairly self-explanatory. So first off, you're going to select your program year. And the program year that you're going to select is the program year of the exit population. Again, very confusing, I know. So in this case, we're going to select 22, 23. But there might be a situation where you have to go back a program year. So you want to pay attention to that. Now, the next pop-up window that's going to come up is going to be selecting the exit quarter. For this case, you'll select 1. I guess this is a little outdated screenshot. Now, if this is grayed out for you for whatever reason, you might have to go back and run this Core Performance Wizard for other quarters first before you can get to the current one. So if you're behind and you haven't started this year already, you might have to go back a couple quarters, run those first before you can get to the current one. The next screen that will pop up is the core performance population. Now, this report should look very familiar to you because we ran it as a pre-check. Just again, you're going to go now verify that it looked the exact same way that you checked off in the pre-check. It'll now here, you can export it, save it. This is your last chance to double check, because once you click finish in this wizard, that's it. There's no way of going back. We can't even ask the programmers to reset it for you. So this is it. You're saving your exit population as is. Now, if you see a student on here and, oh, you meant they actually did have hours, they shouldn't have exited. Once you click finish, that's it. So make sure that this is as accurate as possible and that you've entered all of your attendance hours before you finish this wizard. Then the final screen will say finish, and again, that'll be it. Your core performance population will be saved after you've clicked finish. So that just seems like a lot of steps, but trust me, it's just a lot of clicking through a bunch of screens. So now you've saved your core performance population using the wizard. Next, you're going to send a survey invite out to all the students generated from that wizard that don't have a social security number. So to do that, you'll go to records and then core performance students. And this lister again will show all the students who do not have a social security number. More students that have a social security number, the less students you'll have to send the survey. We have quarterly CTE students only attend class once. That means they're always an exit population. They'll probably fall into that exit population since they exit after 90 days. And yes, so at least once a month, but if you're importing them more than once a month, that's even better. Yeah, so that was a question in the chat. How often should hours be entered? We recommend entering at least once a month, but if you're able to do it multiple times a month, then that's even better. Another question in the chat, sorry, how far would we have to go when this was the first quarter to do this? You might have to go kind of far back, but you'll eventually get there. And if not, you can always contact CASA's at tech support and we can see what's up. Okay, if we find out a student, and this is in the chat, is in the military or received their SSN after the surveys went out and we've entered that new info, will it affect our survey numbers if we don't answer it? If you've, I think that all depends on when we're pulling the data, but they're not gonna be automatically removed from your list. So if you've generated the survey wizard, and like we said in step 2, you've saved your exit population, and then now you've obtained their SSN after they've been on that list, they're not going to automatically be removed from the list. The list is set. We just will now know that they have a social security number. And when we're calculating that, when the reports are ran, it'll know that it has a social security number, so the reports will look good, but it just won't be removed from these listers. I hope that makes sense, Patricia. Okay, so now we're moving on to sending survey invites. Again, once they're on this list, they don't automatically get removed. They will stay on these lists, but yeah, so they'll stay on the listers. Okay, so again, you'll go to records and then core performance students. And this lister will show all the students who don't have a social security number. Now this lister is filtered by exit quarter. And remember, we talked about quarter to take survey versus exit quarter. This lister, we're focusing on exit quarter. And by default, it'll go 2 quarters back, which should be the current quarter that we're in. Now, before sending these surveys, review emails and phone numbers. You should have already been doing that too. The most up-to-date emails and phone numbers, the easier it'll be for you and your staff to reach out to these students. Then the next thing that you'll want to do is you'll filter for CAPE only students. So you'll add in a column that it says is CAPE only. And to do that, you'll on this header here, you'll right click and then a drop down list like this will show and you'll click is CAPE only. And now this will just identify who falls into that NRS students only bucket and then who falls into the CAPE only. All the students that generate on that core performance population list will show up here. So there's no easy way to identify who's in what bucket without adding this column. Then next, this is where you might want to start thinking about how you want to divide up these group of students. Agencies will usually divide these groups of students by their native language or email only, phone only, or if you're able to identify who's in what class, maybe you want to group them all together. And that'll apply a lot when we talk about survey customization, but just kind of think about right now, you know, how do I want to group up these students? Native language is an easy one. Maybe have all the Spanish speakers in one group and then the English speakers in another. So then you'll highlight or select all the students that you want to send a survey to. And then you'll click on send survey invite, which is up in the top toolbar. And once you click that send survey invite, then again, another set of screens. So you'll have a screen that'll review all the students that you've highlighted. Now, let's say you only want to send a group of students that have a native language of Spanish, but a student that has a native language of Farsi accidentally ended up on that list. You can always highlight that student and then remove them from the list on this screen. Review these students, then you'll click next. these are the next two screens that will show. The first one will ask you for a delivery language. And this is where if I selected all the students with native language Spanish, then I can easily click native language Spanish. But if I had some students whose native language was Vietnamese that fell into that, they're going to receive a survey with a Spanish. So you want to make sure that that's why those groupings matter. And then the next one, you'll select the delivery method. And that's why I mentioned maybe you have a group of email only or phone only. Here's where you can choose email only, text only, or maybe just both. You can send them an email and text, up to you. And then the next is selecting your delivery dates. So you're going to choose when the survey gets delivered and then when it expires. Typically, people will just leave it as it is, but maybe you know that your students really look at their phones or look at their emails on a Friday, and you're doing this process today on Thursday. So then you can always change that delivery date to a better date that maybe suits your students' needs or your needs. This all depends on when it is and what day it is. It's up to you. And then after you selected those, then now we'll talk about survey customization. You have the option to apply no customization, and it'll be a very vanilla looking survey. Or you can apply your survey customization, which we highly recommend. And this way, when the student clicks on the survey, it doesn't look like it's a spam email. It could have your logo, it could have your school colors. We can edit the welcome message to say something, that falls in lines with dialogue that comes from your agency. You can also add a friendly sender name. So if you have a person that sits in your front office that everybody knows, that all your students know, and you want to put that friendly face, their name on there, then you can do it and it'll look like it came from that staff member. So there's a lot that you can do personalization wise to make it look like it's coming from your agency and not just this plain old survey. So here's again what some of that looks like. You have alternative agency name. So maybe Topps Pro Enterprise says your name is Rolling Hills Adult School, but your students might know you as RH Adult. Then you can just say RH Adult here. Or you want to change your survey logo to make it look like a certain class or make it look like your specific site, then you can click that here. And then we have that email from friendly sender name. So let's say I'm the person at the front office that everybody knows my name. I can put Nicole Clark here. And then once you're done making all those edits, you can always review these survey customizations before you send it. And this is what it'll look like. You can copy it to your URL. It'll pop up on a window and you can go through the survey, see what it looks like and check off that everything looks good. If you customize it once, will it be there every time? Yes, so it'll save your customizations and you can just save it for next time, edit it for next time, it'll be there. So here's what the survey looks like with zero customization. Like I said, it even has this like French vanilla look in the background. It'll have a welcome message. And then recently, within these last couple months, we've switched around the questions to hope that this is better for students. So the first question that's asked is, are you attending school in a different area? If they answer yes to this question, then they'll have to enter what school that they attend. And then it'll say, do you have a job now? If they answer yes, then it'll ask them how much they earn a month. And then it'll have this ending message. While I'm thinking about it, what's important about this right here is, let's say you have a partner agency. So let's say I'm Corona Norco Adult School and I have this Exeter, and they're entering now that they're going to Poway Adult School. And that is, both of those agencies are WIOA funded and both of them are CAPE funded. if I know that my student is now going to Poway Adult School, I can actually transfer all my data to Poway Adult School, or transfer that student's test scores, attendance, information. So I can send that over to Poway Adult School too, if I know that that student is now attending that other school, as long as everybody both has Top Tier Enterprise. So it's a fun fact. So again, this is what the survey looks like. French vanilla background here. You probably want to make it blue if your school is blue, anything like that, just to make it a little more friendly. Make it actually look like it's not a spam email. I'm sure some students are concerned about that, especially when you're asking stuff like, do you have a job and how much do you earn a month? Now, once you've sent surveys to all students, you'll want to review this core performance lister to make sure that all those surveys have been sent. And we have columns that you can add, has survey Q2, has survey Q4, that you can add to this lister to make sure that you've gotten through all of them. We also have this column that says invitations ready to go. Sometimes that might take a while to update, but once it updates, you'll also know there that if you've sent everybody. Question, do I need a special permission to share or receive data? Yes, so you need special permission to send or receive data, I believe. So you can find that information on the CASAS website, but it's student transfer data. Everybody needs to approve of everything. And so the school that you're getting the information from needs to approve of that data transferring over to the other school. Okay, so we've actually went through all those first steps that are needed to complete this requirement. That is running the pre-check, generating or running that core performance wizard, and then sending a survey to all the students who were generated from that wizard. If you only look at step 3 and you didn't do step 1, then no, you haven't completed the requirement. So that's why you want to make sure that you're doing those steps step by step. Don't try to skip one, because if you don't run the wizard, then you might not have the new population that you need to send surveys to. Now that we're following up with students, we have a invitations lister that you can generate. And an important thing to note about this invitations lister is that it's only filtered by quarter to take survey, and it does not show a student's exit quarter. So I don't know if that student exited 2 quarters ago or 4 quarters ago. It's just only going to tell me that the student needs a survey this exit quarter. And for this is a lot of good information. It's a little more detailed. If you're brand new, maybe just nicely glance over this. It'll give you some good information about the surveys that get sent, but I really recommend looking at our surveys responses lister versus this invitations lister. And so for both of these, invitations lister and the survey responses lister, I recommend that, by default, both of these listers by default will show only these NRS student exiters. You might need to go into filter, and then in this drop-down filter, you might need to select that CAPE only exiter just to show the other population that that you've sent surveys to. And once you've clicked on CAPE only exiters, it might stay that way. So you always want to make sure when you're looking at these listers just to filter back and make sure that you're looking at the correct population. You can always select default and that'll just show everybody. But if you're both WIOA and CAPE, you might need to toggle between NRS and then CAPE only students. So managing survey responses, this is the lister that I like when you're looking at who has responded and who hasn't. And to get there, you'll go to records, survey responses, and then you can use this lister. You can export these responses to see what, maybe you want to know what your student said for what they earn in a month or what schools they're going to. That would show on this lister. And if, as you can see on this lister, we have those two terms that get confused, that people get confused all the time, the quarter to take survey and the exit quarter. So make sure that if you want to see who you need to send surveys to, you're going to focus on this quarter to take survey. The exit quarter is just going to identify if they exited 2 quarters ago or 4 quarters ago. What is the benefit of filtering for CAPE and NRS when sending the survey? The survey is the same for both of them, correct? Yes, so the survey is the same for both of them, but if you are a WIOA Title II agency, it's not going to show you by default who the CAPE only students. You would have to go into that filter to see the CAPE only students. So that's what it is. And if you are a CAPE only agency and you only have students in CTE, when you first look at that lister or these listers, it might not have anybody, because you have to go into the filter and then filter for CAPE only, and then now all your CTE students will show up on the lister. So that's why it's important. It's just a way, it's just how the default works, that you will have to dig a little deeper to see those CTE pre-apprenticeship students, because it doesn't show up by default. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so you're in this lister, you see a student who hasn't responded, and now you need to contact that student individually. To do that, you can double click on the student and it'll take you to this survey, their student survey response look. And from here, you can see the quarter to take survey, when they've exited. You can see their delivery status, if the student actually looked at the survey. So survey access means that they've opened the survey. Survey responded no. If this survey access said yes, but the survey responded no, what that tells me is that they looked at it and then they closed it. So they didn't click finish. They just glanced at it really quick and then closed it out. If your staff is individually reaching out to these students, you can edit some contact status. Maybe you want to say call again in the evening, or the number was no longer in service, and then write those in the contact notes. If you're ready to contact the student, then you can click answer survey. So I would maybe call them by their phone, this phone number here. Then I get the student on the phone, I'd click answer survey. A browser window will pop up and I can enter the survey responses for the student. You can't just, unfortunately, you can't just enter the student information here. You have to click answer survey. So what makes CAPE only student? Yeah, so what makes a CAPE only student? CTE, no ESL, correct. So if you're only marking students as CTE only, and they don't have an ESL, then that would put them in the CAPE only category. So reviewing survey responses, we have add, survey answered, employed, and survey wage. You can add those columns to the lister to see it right there on the screen what their answers were for your students. So let's say you are the admin at your school and you're getting additional help from staff or teachers to get responses for your survey. You can, as the admin, can go in and see what everybody has responded to, what the student's response was through this lister based off of what your teacher or staff are entering in. So everybody should have access to this in case multiple people need to look at it for whatever reasons. And then let's say now you have a data work group and you want to export all the responses and discuss where students are. Maybe they're moving to a different school site, or maybe you want to improve their outcomes. Then you can export the student survey items in an Excel and then do any type of data view from there and then distribute it if you need. Another question here. Do we have to send the survey or can we personally contact the students? Oh, that's a great question. So you have to send the survey step 3. So you have to export, you have to run the wizard, and then you have to send that survey out. In order for it to populate on the survey responses lister. So you do have to go through a couple steps to get here. But then from here, you can contact the students. It requires us to collect additional data in addition to what that requires. Yeah, so and that's a good point. There's a lot of agencies who want to maybe get a little more information from their students, and contacting them personally would be a good way. A way you can get around it, maybe you can remove, yeah, you know, I would maybe like just send the email only. Maybe you don't want to text it out to the students, and that's why you would click that email only. And then once it gets to the survey responses lister, then that's where you can have the staff click on or individually contact the students. So we have additional reports available to everyone for your CAPE only populations. In order to do that, you'll go to State Reports, California, and then Core Performance Population. We also have our CAPE Employment and Earnings Survey, Employment Earnings Summary, and then quarterly results. So you can see what your results look quarterly for your CAPE students. You can also see how many were sent an invitation, how many accessed. It'll calculate all that information for you, especially if you want to send that maybe to an admin or your district or something. Now, the last question that I get all the time is, how do I know that I've completed the requirement? The way that you're going to look that you completed the requirement is going to be the same as the way that I look at it and confirm that you've completed the requirement. So we're doing the same thing. Okay, so to do that, you'll go to your surveys responses lister, and then you'll review your exit quarters. If I see that you have sent surveys to students in the proper exit quarter, then I will mark your agency off as having completed the requirement. So in this case, or in this quarter, agencies are required to send surveys to students that exited in 22-23 Q1. So if I go into surveys, responses, and I see that students are in, I look at this exit quarter column and I see 22-23 Q1, then that to me says you've done the requirement, we can mark you off, and now you'll get a data submission confirmation. That process is not automatic. So once you send the survey, you're going to have to give CASAS a little bit of time to go in and review your data. And we'll do that on our own. You don't have to inform us that you've done it. We'll do it on our own and we will mark it off. Sometimes we do it once a week, but the closer we get to the data submission deadline, we're doing it more frequently. So if you did it like last month, then you're going to need to give us a little time to get caught up here, and then we'll send you a confirmation eventually. But that's the way you check, and that's the way that I will check. And then so we will, okay, so then in your quarterly data submission wizard, what we'll do is, or what you'll see here is that we ask about how you're looking to improve your responses. So we take information about intake, exit, follow-up, and administration. So if this is also your first time and you're looking to improve responses, this might be a way to look to get ideas about how you can improve your survey responses. Maybe you need to, you know, update your intake process so that you can get more Social Security numbers. So these are suggestions, and this is a way for us to collect information about how you're getting those responses from your students. Okay, now we have some document links available, and I think Mandalee already posted those in the chat a while ago. We have a one-stop shop for everything, and that is on our Employment and Earnings Survey webpage. We, again, provide quarterly guidelines at CASAS. That is step-by-step guidelines on how to do this. So if this is your first time and you don't remember what I said, or you only remember the general ideas that you you can go into these guidelines and it'll say, okay, step 1, click this button, then do this, then do that. We will guide you line by line. And I recommend, if this is your first time and you're going to continue doing this quarter to quarter, take the guidelines and go step by step. Again, if you don't run this core performance employment wizard, then you're not going to see any students on your survey responses. You're not going to see your core performance lister generate properly. So you have to do it in the order that we suggest in order for you to see what we need to see for you to complete the requirement.
And Nicole?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Mandalee. There was a question earlier, and it may have got lost when I was posting links. So Patricia Garcia asked, if student is contacted but declines to answer, will that count as a completed requirement?
So when we're looking at the percentage of how many students responded, that means that they've clicked finish on the survey. So if they refuse to respond, then you can write that in your notes, but that doesn't change what your survey responses is, if that makes sense. So if somebody declines to respond, it'll say that they just that you don't have a response. It doesn't mean that you can't just check them off the box and say, okay, well, they're done. No, we have to get a response in order for us to calculate that response percentage. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so do we automatically do both surveys, WIOA and CAPE? So if you are a WIOA Title II agency, or maybe next year you will be a WIOA Title II agency, it will do both for you. These steps, it'll guide you through both of those, the steps, but it's not like you'll have to rerun the survey wizard. The core performance wizard will do both for you for WIOA and CAPE. Sending the surveys is both for WIOA and CAPE. When you start looking at the survey responses, that's when you'll have to toggle between CAPE only and WIOA only. So again, that question was, do we have to automatically do both surveys for WIOA and CAPE? And the answer is the process will allow you to do it. It's one process for both WIOA and CAPE. Question in the chat, do we have to run a second survey for WIOA, or are both quarters included automatically? Do we have to run a second survey for WIOA? So the answer to that is no, you do not have to run a second survey for WIOA. The student is going to get one survey. So let's say the student exited 2 quarters ago and 4 quarters ago. The student's only going to get one survey, and that's only going to show up as one survey line in TOPS Pro Enterprise. It's not going to show as a duplicate if they exited 2 and 4 quarters ago and you need to survey them in this quarter. So it'll only show up once, and once for the student. Are both quarters? Yeah, and both quarters included automatically. So yes, it's all done automatically. Students only going to get one survey if they exited 2 and 4 quarters ago. I know there's a lot of quarters to manage here. We get that, and I totally understand. So yes. But if your student is exiting almost every quarter, they might get the survey every quarter, but they're only going to get it once for that quarter. Okay, and then so here's our costless resources, and I do have a little bit of time. So Mandalee and Veronica, is it okay if I go into TOPS Pro Enterprise and show them quickly these steps?
Yes, please.
Okay. And a question again in the chat, you might have already answered this question, but how many surveys do we need completed? If you are a WIOA Title II agency, you're looking at that 60% range as getting responses back. So the more responses you get, the better odds, or that looks better for you and that. But the requirement for CAPE, so if you're a CAPE only agency and you're not WIOA and you're not going to be WIOA again, you just need to send those surveys to the students. That is the current requirement right now. Okay, so I'm going to end this share and I'm going to pop into TOPS Pro Enterprise. That way you can see what TOPS Pro Enterprise looks like. So bear with me for 1 second.
Nicole, and while you do that, there was a question right above the other from Edith. It asks, so it says recommendation on soliciting response when asking, quote, how much do you earn, quote. Is there a recommendation?
Soliciting response, recommend on soliciting response when how much do you earn? That can change from person to person, you know, and I know that some students are hesitant to answer. If they're really hesitant to answer, you want to put at least $1, and but you know that they have a job. $1, that'll say they do have a, you know, they do have that wage and they do earn. Maybe you ask a range. Do you earn between $15 and $2,000 a month? And if they say yes, then maybe you write, okay, then the average of that is 17. You know, you might want to ask for a range and then put the average of that range in that column. So there's a couple different ways to go about it, depending on how much information that Exeter wants to give you. Yes, so put a dollar. So there's really good information in the chat too. And a lot of that too will be covered in Jay's session, in our panel session later this month too. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to run through everything I talked about in the PowerPoint quickly in TOPS Pro Enterprise. So running the core performance population report as a pre-check. To do that, you'll go to Reports, State Reports, California, Core Performance Population. Here's a screen that generates. I'm going to select the exit quarter I'm looking for. So I'm looking for 22-23. And then under quarter here, under special options, you can either run it for the whole year, but I'll just only select quarter 1 and I will generate that. And it's not going to generate because I'm in Rolling Hills probably. I don't know why, but it would generate for you. And then you can review your list of students and go from there. For tools, so now you're running the wizard, you go to Tools, Core Performance Wizard, Rolling Hills, select program year 2021-23. Then I'll click Next. Oh, looks like I've already ran the quarter that I needed to. I needed to run Q1. Q1's not there anymore. That means I've already done it, so that's good too. This is bad for my demonstration, but it's good for Rolling Hills Adult. So now I need to review the list of students in my core performance population. I'll go to Records, Core Performance Students. And now here's all the list of students that were generated in the wizard. I've right-clicked on this top bar here, and I can add is CAPE only. I can add has survey Q2. And I can see that, yes, some of these students are CAPE only, and no, does not have a survey. And this is for exit quarter equals 21-23 Q1. Now, if I want to look at the survey response, and then to send a survey, maybe I highlight all these students in Spanish, and then I'll click send survey invite. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm going through this fairly quickly. Now here, do you see my new window with the employment earnings survey invitation wizard?
Yes.
Okay, now I'll click next. Here's the list of students that I selected. Oops, I accidentally selected a student with native language equals English. I can delete that student from this lister and I can continue on. My delivery language, I'll select Spanish. Next. Delivery method would be, let's say, use both. So that means it's going to send them an email and a text message. Agencies, you can send a student up to 3 text messages a quarter. After 3, it's going to stop you. You can send a lot of emails, but that's it. I'm just going to leave this one as B, click next, and I'm going to apply the survey customization next. And that's where I can do all the editing that I need to do from here. Now, before the time goes up to, I also want to add that once the data submission due date goes by, Topps Pro Enterprise will not allow you to send surveys to students who needed to be exited the quarter before. So if you haven't done the Q1 requirement and the Q2 requirement, then you're going to need to contact CASAS so that we can help you with what the next steps you need to take in order to fulfill those back end requirements. So just want to note that. And then here I can click preview survey. It'll give me a link and I can preview the survey through that link. Okay, I'm going to exit here because I can't really go on since this is a fictitious database. Now I'll go to records, survey responses to see who has responded. Now here is all the students. I'm going to filter. And then here I currently have the filter on default. That's because before this I clicked on filter by default. But for you, if this is your first time, it'll say NRS exiters only. Maybe I just want to look at CAPE only, and then I'll click OK. Quarter to take survey. It's going to show me all of these, but maybe I want to focus just on this quarter, which is 22, 23 Q1. There's nobody on this list. Let's look again at the NRS exiters. And sorry, I'm going quickly because I know we're at the end. Quarter to take survey. Again, this is the quarter, so I'm going to select my current deliverable quarter, 22, 23 Q3. Okay. And that's not populating either. So look at that. But if I needed to enter in a survey response, I can highlight the student, double click. I can click here to write in some contact notes. Oh, hung up on me. That's great. Oops. But now let's say I get them. I click answer survey, and now I can answer the survey to the student. Okay, so that was all. That's just my quick run through of what that looks like in Topps Pro Enterprise. Again, if you want the step-by-step guidelines, go to our link in the CASAS website for the step-by-step guidelines. Print out a copy or just pull it up on your screen. Start at bullet 1 and then run through the end. There are frequently asked questions at the back of the survey. So if you want to know how to know that you've completed the requirement, look at those frequently asked questions. It's the first question. If you have any questions at all, you can always contact me. We can contact CAPE at casas.org. If you even want to say, hey, Nicole, did I even do this correctly? Can you double check? I would be very happy to answer that for you. I do it for a lot of agencies, so I promise you that I won't be offended if you ask me that. And if you ask me every quarter, it's fine. So I think that's it for me. There's one more question in the chat I'll answer. The question is, does it matter how far back the survey is? I have some from 2021 and 21-22. If this is your first time running it and you have some very far back, just start with what was due in Q1 of this year. You don't need to go back to what was due for previous quarters. You only start at what was due Q1 of this year. So Nicholas, I recommend emailing CAPE at casas.org so we can help you through that. But you don't need to go super far back, only complete what was due this program here. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. I know everyone stayed on to the bitter end. We really appreciate all your information. And for those of you that are looking for the PowerPoint, once it's fully remediated, we'll share out with everybody that attended today. We also ask that you please take just a few moments and fill out the evaluation link. It really does help us inform how we move forward with remediation of our videos. And I think everyone's going to want this one. So I do appreciate that. And lots of thank yous in the chat for Nicole. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.